Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate you guys doing that always. Today, we're just going to go ahead and get into some more of the famous, unknown pioneers, founders of the so called West and Southwest of North America, the United States. In this case, we're going to be talking about one of the pioneers of San Francisco and, in general, the state of California. His name is William Alexander Leidesdorff. All right, so we're going to get right into it. This is an image of him as what appears to be online. All right, and I'll show you guys also another image that floats around there, which looks nothing like this person, and the other image, which is in general a drawing. It looks more like a so-called white man, you know. Even though this guy can pass for white, I would say, but this is, as you guys are gonna see, a so-called black man. All right. So the first thing you usually get when you Google something, right? You get Wikipedia, right? So this is just for general knowledge. Again, that's the hijack. This is the image they got here. This is what I'm telling you. William Alexander Leidesdorff, right? This, so he's supposed to be black. This drawing right here, man. Wow. I mean, you know, either way, born in St. Croix, Danish, West Indies, right? So it says William Alexander Leidesdorff was an Afro-Caribbean. This guy looked like an Afro to you. That's what I'm saying. That's the hijack with the whitewashed images, right? Settler in California and one of the founders of the city that became San Francisco. One of the founders, not the only one, but one of the most important founders, a highly successful enterprise and businessman. He is thought to have been the first black millionaire in the United States. All right. Now check it out real quick, because this was just, the very first thing we're looking at, because we're just going over the general information, what they say about him online. You got to have a whole background, though, to what they're saying, understand, the whole context. It says, Leidesdorff was a West Indian, huh? Immigrant of Afro-Cuban, supposedly Afro-Cuban, huh? Possibly Carib, huh? Carib, like Carib Indians, possibly Carib, Danish, Swedish, and Jewish, huh? Jewish, huh? Danish, Jewish, Carib, West Indian. Sounds like a possible Sephardic Jewish descendant with mixed with Indian. That's what it sounds like to me. Later, sort of became a United States citizen in New Orleans in 1834. He migrated to Alta California in 1841, then under Mexican rule, settling in Yerba Buena, now San Francisco. Okay. So that's the general knowledge. It says here on the Organization of Black Maritime Graduates, William Alexander Leidesdorff Jr. You see, they got the correct image. You see that? A lot of people know it says in 2011, the OBMG honored William Alexander Leidesdorff Jr. He was one of the earliest Black U.S. citizens of California and a highly successful enterprising businessman and millionaire. Born in the Virgin Islands and journeying to New Orleans at a young age, he engaged in the maritime field. As master of the 106-ton schooner named Julia Ann, he would make the famous trading voyage to the Pacific. All right. He was a merchant, huh? His route would include destinations to ports in Panama, St. Croix, Brazil, Chile, the Sandwich Islands, Hawaii, and Alaska. After several years, his route brought him and his vessel into San Francisco Bay, landing at the point known as Yerba Buena Cove. On arriving at Yerba Buena, Leidesdorff Jr. began to build his businesses. He launched the first steamboat to operate on San Francisco Bay and the Sacramento River. He built the City Hotel, the first hotel in San Francisco, and the first commercial shipping warehouse. William A. Leidesdorff has also been officially recognized as the African founding father of California. That's the hijack with the African. I'll be waiting for anybody to prove his African part. Just because he's so-called black doesn't mean he's African. When he has Carib and possibly Sephardic Jewish ancestry, both of those people were melanated, so-called black. All right. So at least though, a so-called black founding father of California. As founder of public education in California, he organized construction, built and reopened the first public school in California. You guys hear that? A black man at Portsmouth Square, San Francisco. He did become a Mexican, as says here, citizen in 1844. He received a land grant of 35,000 acres on the American River that encompassed what is today Folsom, California, located outside of Sacramento. After his untimely death in 1848, Williams' trading partner, John Sutter, announced the discovery of gold on the land owned by Leidesdorff. Values of Leidesdorff holdings increased to more than 1.5 million in 1856, which would equate to somewhere in the $1 billion range in today's dollars. All right. So that's a little bit real quick on him. And just going back to Wikipedia, it says here, Leidesdorff was born in 1810 in the island of St. Croix in the Danish West Indies. To William Leidesdorff Sr., a white, so-called white Danish merchant, thus the hijack, and Anne Marie Spark, a Creole woman. A Creole woman, huh? As his parents were not legally married, Leidesdorff was considered illegitimate until July 18, 1837, when Crucian court formally recognized his birth, allowing him to inherit his father's properties. It says, Wilhelm Leidesdorff Sr., his dad, was reportedly of Jewish descent from the community of Altona, Hamburg, huh? It was part of the Danish Schleswig-Holstein, then across the river from, but now part of today's port of Hamburg, Germany. He migrated to North America and later the Caribbean to further his career as a merchant. Who's the merchants, right? We're going to get into what's significant about Hamburg and the whole history we know about Sephardic Jews being refugees in different parts of Europe after they left the Spanish or the Catholic Inquisition. They left Spain and Portugal and traveled to these places as refugees. Hamburg was one of them. I'm going to show you that. Real quick, it says here, Leidesdorff Jr.'s mother, Anna Marie Sparks, was described in one account as a Carib Indian woman. Hello, his mom, a Carib, his mom an Indian, huh? Anna Marie Sparks. So how did they get her name like that? She was believed also to have had African and European ancestry, believed. Oh, because she has a dark complexion, so you're calling her an African. Her race was noted in a census report. Many people observed that what were called Carib people had skin of various hues that likely reflected mixed ancestry, ranging from dark brown, copper-colored tribes of America, to lighter shades of brown, copper-colored tribes of America, dark brown to lighter shades of brown. Huh? She was a Carib, huh? Resulting in a Virgin Islands Creole, to which she may have belonged. They don't even know, they're just guessing, but they definitely knew she had something to do with an Indian. Other sources said the mother, Marie Ann Spark, as she was also known, was mixed race, woman of African and Spanish heritage, thought to have been born in Cuba. So which one is it? That's two different things. In census records, Marie Ann Spark was classified as a free Carib Indian. The census record says she's a Carib Indian, but few Caribs survived until the late 18th century, according to Gary Polgan's biography of Leidesdorff. All right. Other sources document tens of thousands of Caribs, most of mixed heritage, living in the windwards in Trinidad at the time of Leidesdorff's birth. Together, the accounts describe Spark as a light-skinned woman of mixed race ancestry. She was a Carib. They're classified as black by the 1850s California court system, done by an Indian. Because of her look, they try to apply that one-drop rule, like, oh no, you're so-called black or Negro, by the 1850s California court system, where blacks were restricted from testifying in court. But that was his mom, an Indian. According to Sue Bailey Thurman, with the name of William Alexander Leidesdorff, we begin the documentary history of pioneers of Negro origin in California. And that's a book I've been trying to get. And it's like $1,500 one place and $4,500 another place. It's like ridiculous, like there's no PDF copy. So trying to make it hard for people to learn the truth, keep these books inaccessible. All right, says that as an infant, Leidesdorff was baptized as a Lutheran. as were all the Leidesdorff children, since it was the adopted faith. His father and many other people of Jewish ancestry in Europe assumed to avoid conflict. They were what? Crypto Jews. All right? They were supposed to be Lutheran. All right? They're supposed to be Lutheran, but they're doing it only to hide, to avoid conflict because of the Catholic Inquisition. You guys see the trend? You guys see the trend? All right, so I just wanted to read that real quick. Now, it told us his dad was coming from Hamburg, right? Germany. Now, look at this. This is European Union for Progressive Judaism. It says Hamburg's hidden Jewish heritage. All right. It says Judaism first arrived in Hamburg with Sephardic Jews fleeing Spain and Portugal in the 16th century. Okay, like I said, like the history we've been learning. Reform Judaism emerged in Germany in the 19th century, product of Jewish emancipation. All right, so, but it first got there with who? With the Sephardic Jews. That's what we're talking about. The Portuguese Jewish community in Hamburg. From about 1590 on, there had been a Portuguese Jewish community in Hamburg. Remember what they were saying? The general consensus of the Portuguese Jew, the Sephardic Jew from Portugal, he was very dark complexioned. All right. And this people existed in Hamburg until its compulsory merger with the Ashkenazi congregation in 1939. All the way from the 1500s, they were way there before. And we're talking about 1939. The first Sephardic settlers were Portuguese, Marranos, Morenos, Marranos, who had fled their country under Philip II and Philip III, at first concealing their religion, just like Leidesdorff's parents, right? They were Lutheran because they were trying to avoid conflict, concealing their religion in their new place of residence. Many of them had immigrated from Spain in the belief that they had found refuge in Portugal. Okay, so again, in 1603, the aldermen made complaints to the Senate government about the growing influx of Portuguese Jews. The Senate asked the Lutheran theological faculties of Jena, Lutheran, and Frankfurt on the other for their opinions in the matter, and after many negotiations, it was agreed that in consideration of a payment made for their protection, the Sephardim should be tolerated in the town as strangers. Listen, though they were not to be allowed to practice their religion publicly. They had to be Lutherans. They had to pay a fee. You guys hearing this? This practice was neither new nor unique in the city's policy. Immigrants, many as refugees during the 30 Years' War, were differently treated according to their religion and denomination. All non-Lutherans, Anglican Britons, merchants, adventurers of London and Hamburg, and Catholic Jews and Reformed Dutch merchants were forbidden to publicly perform their religion. Lutheran refugees, in parentheses, in contrast, were rapidly absorbed into the population with so-called foreigner contracts. That's what we're talking about here. In 1605, the Senate regulated the city's relationship to its other refugees, mostly Calvinists or Huguenots, in return for an annual tax. In 1612, the Sephardic Jewish community also received foreign contracts, as did the Ashkenazi community soon thereafter. All right, so just showing you again, there's a whole history here. This is SephardicGenealogy.com, Sephardic genealogy in Germany, Hamburg, and the German states. Portuguese Jews settled in Hamburg around the 1580s, initially treated as Christians due to their valuable trade connections because they had the business, they had the ports, they had all the trade on lockdown. Remember what we've been learning. By 1612, approximately 125 Sephardic Jews lived in Hamburg, growing to 600 by 1663. All right, so again, going back, it says that William Leidesdorff Sr., his dad, was reportedly of Jewish descent from the community of Hamburg, Altona. Hamburg, Altona. It says here the Jews' ethnicity and identity in early modern Hamburg. Okay, and this is from UC Berkeley University. Said during the 17th century, a vibrant and complex Jewish community developed in Hamburg and its surrounding areas. This community was comprised of several sub-communities that varied because of social and economic factors, ethnic differences, and external political pressures. Utilizing the protocol books of Portuguese Jewish community in Hamburg, Bell examines the nature and scope of this community by considering the relations between Sephardic, Portuguese, and Ashkenazic Tedesco Jews. All right, in Hamburg, a lot of history there. This is the jc.com, the Sephardic Jews of Hamburg. in the port area of Hamburg, bisected by Dittmar Kohlstrasse and Ruststrasse, lies a small enclave of streets with a clutch of Spanish and Portuguese restaurants owned by Portuguese families whose origin goes back hundreds of years. Marrano, Marrano Jews from Spain and Portugal settled in Hamburg during the 17th century at the same time as they did in Amsterdam and in London. A small community was also established in Altona, Altona, now a suburb to the west of Hamburg, and Altona of what? Marranos, who was in Altona? Wilhelm Leidesdorff Sr., this is his guy's dad we're talking about, the so-called black founder of San Francisco, was reportedly of Jewish descent from the community of Altona, Altona, Hamburg, all right, matching what we just read. And the Times of Israel agrees Hamburg's rediscovers its hidden Jewish heritage, all right? And it goes into that as well. I just wanted to show you guys that to have a clear background because they try to, Africanize people. And you must understand, everything they leave kind of out, they're not really explaining things correctly. You guys understand? A lot of these Sephardic Jews were melanated. They had been refugees in all these countries after they had fled Spain and Portugal, and so they had become Germans, French, Dutch, English, and in this case, these were Germans, right, already, but they were so-called Jewish, right? That was a town for Sephardic Jews, and Hamburg was a big place where they were settling, so it all connects here. We're gonna move ahead. It says here actually this is from the Journal of Negro History, first of all, so you guys can know what I'm reading from. Volume 38, number 3, July 1953, as you guys can see here. I'm just zooming in. It says the influence of William Alexander Leidesdorff on the history of California. Okay, and we're gonna go right to the article. And it says here, that's the same title. It says the history of San Francisco in its early years was influenced by several important individuals who played significant roles in the development of the state. One of the most important was William Alexander Leidesdorff, who came to the present state of California in 1841. William Alexander Leidesdorff was born on the St. Croix Island in the West Indies, which at that time belonged to Denmark. But there are other places which claim him as a native son, but this island seems most likely. He was the son of a Dane and a mulatto woman, possibly Caribbean, right? They call her mulatto. They translate she's African, maybe European. We would have to really go into it, but most likely they're Indian. They couldn't hide that part, and she's most likely very indigenous. All right, they call her mulatto here, and it says so the son of a Dane, which was Sephardic Jewish, most likely coming from Hamburg, right, and a mulatto woman, and had an amount of Negro blood in his veins. His latest biographer, James Manning, after searching all the papers and records available, comes to the conclusion, like all those who have studied the life of Leidesdorff, that he had considerable Negro blood, a fact which is revealed by his portrait. All right, so that was the image we were looking at. Now, I think we have the book here, History of California, where they're saying there's nothing really when you start. I'm gonna show you guys when we start reading certain books about him. There's really no mention of him being a so-called Negro, right, or so-called Black. They're kind of leaving that part out of history. This is one of the actual books they're referencing back in that article. Let me show you. So you see the number 2 here, footnote. Negro blood in his veins. Number 2 is Bancroft's History of California, Volume 4, page 279. That's exactly what I have here. History of California, Volume 4, all right, by Heward Bancroft, and page 279. It says here, new names of foreigners. Sorry, let me just zoom in. Again, page 279. New names of foreigners in the records of 1841, not including the muster rolls of the U.S. exploring expedition, number nearly 200, all of them given elsewhere in my Pioneer Register, and many earlier in this chapter in connection with narratives of the immigrant parties. There were, however, only 67 entitled to be classed as pioneer residents, and these are named in the appended list. Most prominent as citizens of California were Belden, Bidwell, Charles, Green, and Leidesdorff. That's him right there. Rollins, Stephen Smith, Temple, Thomas, Toombs, Weber, Wilson, and Workman. And 13 of all the numbers still survived, I think, in 1884. All right, so see, not in the mention of him, so I don't know why they use that as a reference. Not even in this footnote saying anything about him being black or Negro or anything like that. So the article, that's what they cited, and I went there, and it doesn't really say that, but his portrait, um, that's kind of show him, to be a black, so-called black man. So this marriage was not a legal one in the recognized sense, but an illegitimate relation. The child was born out of wedlock, but the laws of Denmark allowed the father to legalize his son. This action is brought out by the court records of the St. Croix Island. This particular document is dated July 18th, 1837, and put this illegitimate son in line to inherit his father's property. The Danish law was flexible on this point, and his father took advantage of it. His education was secured in the St. Croix Island, but we have no way of knowing the extent of his education. Whether whether he was a college graduate or not remains uncertain, since his father wanted him to inherit his property. It is reasonable to suppose that he gave him every advantage he possibly could. Young Leidesdorff came later to the United States and took out naturalization papers in the Eastern District of Louisiana. This action was recorded on February 25th, 1834. He perhaps felt that American citizenship would be of advantage to him in his chosen occupation. He was a captain of a vessel out of New Orleans for several years, but later moved to New York. How long he operated out of that city is not at once available. Captain Leidesdorff sailed from New York to Sandwich Island, the name by which Hawaii was then known. Okay. When he sailed from New York to the Sandwich Island, it is not known, but he came to California in 1841. He piloted the Julia Ann, owned by J.D. Jones of New York, the American consul at the Sandwich Island. H. Bancroft, in his works on the West, gave a list of new arrivals each year until California was annexed to the United States. The names of those who came in the year 1841 were about 200. Among them was William Alexander Leidesdorff. The names of the most prominent on the muster rolls of the exploring parties in the western part of the United States were Talbot Green, Joshua Belden, Joseph B. Childs, John Rowland, Stephen Smith, Francis Temple, Charles Weber, Benjamin Wilson, William Workman, John Bidwell, Albert G. Toombs, and William Alexander Leidesdorff. That's the same source we just came from, right? Some of whom became prominent in the history of California. Only 13 of the persons on the list of arrivals in 1841 could be located in 1884. The Julia Ann, the ship which Leidesdorff piloted, was a schooner of 106 tons and was listed among the 60 ships which came to the coast that year. In 1841, J.C. Jones sold the Julia Ann, thereby putting out of work the young captain who piloted the ship. He was forced to give up the sea and go into business of some sort or find another ship to pilot. He selected the former and established himself as a merchant at Yerba Buena. This was the name by which San Francisco was known in the early days. Edwin Bryant, who later exerted some influence on the history of California, said that when he came to California, he was treated with a mark of hospitality by William Alexander Leidesdorff, who was then a prosperous merchant in Yerba Buena. Leidesdorff had been located at this place for 5 or 6 years and was a man of great importance in this thriving new town. Brian was amazed that his host could speak most of the modern languages and dialects then in use in that section of the West. This might in some way explain why he was able to build a thriving business. So I'm sure Spanish was one of the main languages, right? So he could speak all these languages, right? So wouldn't he be able to, as a Sephardic Jew, possibly still know how to speak a little bit of Spanish like his ancestors did? Maybe. Leidesdorff was spoken of by one writer who visited Northern California as one of the most prominent men in Yerba Buena. Many of the records about the northern section of California deal with the activities of William Alexander Leidesdorff. In the year 1844, Leidesdorff took out a Mexican citizenship, as did many Americans who went to the West. For, Me- for Mexicans, there were certain advantages not granted to Americans. As a result of his Mexican citizenship, he received a grant of 8 leagues of land from the Mexican government. This land, put in terms of American land measurement, was equal to 35,000 acres, which were located in the Sacramento Valley on the left bank of the American River. This grant was called Rio del Rancho Americano. The city of Folsom, California now stands on part of this grant. William Alexander Leidesdorff was a very important leader in civic affairs and served in many important positions. The subject of education was one of the important subjects which concerned the people of early San Francisco and was discussed in 1847, but got no further than the discussion stage, and no definite action was taken. Immediately after the organization of the first town council in September of this same year, a committee was appointed with authority to look into the advisability of erecting a school building. The committee was composed of William Alexander Leidesdorff, William Glover, and William S. Clark. The men who composed the committee were among the best known and most respected in the community. The committee went about its work and provided for the school. The first public school of San Francisco was opened on Portsmouth Square, and the teacher was Thomas Douglas, a graduate of Yale University. The first school opened after American occupation on April 3rd, 1848, was developed into a system of great importance. The citizen at one time was a member of the City Council of Yerba Buena, along with W.D.M. Howard, Robert Parker, and E.P. Jones. Leidesdorff was appointed as the treasurer of that body, and his journal is available in the California Historical Society. His journal reveals that he received $2,412 from Mr. Hyde, and from all sources from October 7th to December 5th, 1848, he received $4,475. He also served on important committees for the council. Washington A. Bartlett, who had served as a lieutenant on the Portsmouth, the ship commanded by Captain Montgomery during the time of the uprising, was accused of misappropriating funds belonging to the town. This was a very serious charge and one the city council could not ignore, for his duty was to protect the funds of the town. Bartlett was so certain he had conducted his office properly that he asked that the case be investigated. The council appointed for that purpose a committee composed of Captain William Alexander Leidesdorff, all right, a so-called black man, W.D. Howard, and Juan Guerino. The committee examined Bartlett's office, the records, and money on hand. It found no irregularities and exonerated Bartlett of the charges. Leidesdorff was without much doubt one of the most significant members of the council. Consequently, he was constantly placed on committees. Leidesdorff was very active in the affair concerning the United States in the uprising of America against Mexico. The United States had only one consul, Thomas A. Larkin, while California was under Mexican control. Larkin was given wide authority, but was to do nothing to stir up a revolution. Should one occur, the council was to assure the Californians that he would give them protection if they decided to separate. In the light of what happened, it is reasonable to suppose that the Americans made it convenient to find reasons to aid the revolt. The work placed upon this council as a result of the conflict with the government of Mexico was tremendous, and he was located at Monterrey. The council felt that he needed an assistant at Yerba Buena because of the amount of business there. Thomas A. Larkin appointed Captain William A. Leidesdorff, American Vice Consul for the port of San Francisco, which he held from 1845 to July 1846. The consul said that the State Department never used the title for its consular agent, but as consul he had used the authority of his book of rules to give such a title to William A. Leidesdorff. Larkin said his authority to appoint a sub-consul was derived from his own appointment by the President of the United States, John Tyler. The specific authority which he was using was found in Section 7 in the Book of Instructions. Larkin felt, however, that Alcalde of Mexico would probably use the term consular agent, but thought there would be a little difference. Throughout his consular life, William A. Leidesdorff was referred to as subconsul. After Leidesdorff had been acting for some time under the authority given him by the appointment by Larkin, sent him a letter speaking about his 3 months' pay. Larkin informed the subconsul that word had come from the State Department that the subconsul could not be recognized until a letter was received from the President of Mexico. This routine, it was thought, would take about a year, and in the meanwhile, he advised Leidesdorff to act on authority given him by the council and his book of instructions. Leidesdorff perhaps was not pressed for whatever salary was due him, as he was engaged in a prosperous business. On May 29, 1846, Larkin wrote his subconsul again and thanked him for sending a soldier to bring the mail which had come to San Francisco on board of the British ship Vancouver. He hastened to tell his subconsul that he had not received any official communication of the date already known by both of them, but that he was much concerned about the frigate Congress, which was due to arrive that month. This was indicate that some important news was expected. It would seem that the assistance which Leidesdorff gave was to aid Larkin in his effort with the Californians who were attempting to overthrow the Mexican authorities. This letter writing went on, and on May 30th, 1846, Leidesdorff wrote to Larkin and said that he had received the letter which was sent him on May 24th of that year. Leidesdorff said that the sub-prefect in California had informed him that he had received his orders from Monterey and felt sure that the news was well known to Larkin. The subconsul said this news would be handed to Larkin by one directly from Captain Fremont's camp. It appears that Fremont had returned in spite of the fact that he had been ordered out of California. The letter further stated Gillespie was to arrive in a few days. The contents of this letter would indicate that Leidesdorff was active in the revolt in California. July 17, 1846, Leidesdorff wrote to Larkin again about the uprising and said he doubted the loyalty of Captain William Sturgis Hinckley, and said further that he would like to see Hinckley replaced, for he was the worst enemy the United States had. This gives an idea of how carefully these men observed everyone. If Larkin was a part of the intrigue to establish the United States on the Pacific coast, if you can doubt his part in it since the publication of his papers, then Leidesdorff played a large part in it too. You guys hear? This is not at all surprising, for Larkin would only have been interested in a person who could aid him in his objective. The part played by Leidesdorff is clearly revealed by the letters which passed between these men and which are readily available. Captain Montgomery wrote to Leidesdorff and said he was surprised that 200 men had been collected so soon to put down the insurgents. The insurgents? I don't know no insurgents. The subconsul said Captain Montgomery was sitting tight in Yerba Buena and watching events as they unfolded. On July 8, 1846, Captain Montgomery wrote another letter to the subconsul and said the next morning he planned to land a considerable supply of men under arms. They were to march from the boat to the flagstaff in Yerba Buena, and they would leave the boat at 8:30. At 8 o'clock, the flag of the United States was to be raised and a salute of 21 guns given. Finally, the proclamation of the Commander-in-Chief, Commodore Sloat, was to be read. Captain Montgomery wanted to be sure that there was no misunderstanding and that all parties would clearly understand the proclamation, and so he ordered that it be read in both Spanish and English so that the information would be given to all. Captain Montgomery asked Leidesdorff to have the proclamation translated and ready at the appointed time. You hear who they asked to translate it from English to Spanish? How did he know Spanish? This was the real contribution of Leidesdorff in securing California for the United States, okay? A so-called black man. And has Indian in him and Sephardic Jewish ancestry. After California became a part of the United States, there was no longer any need for the subconsul, hence his office was closed. The real reason he wanted to close it, no doubt, was that he was anxious to get back to his main business, that of merchandising. There is some evidence that merchandising was always his first consideration. In a letter to Larkin, May 7th, 1846, Leidesdorff asked to have all men of work get their supplies from his store, for he said this would enable him to pay his note much sooner. Leidesdorff also spoke of a change of government and said he hoped it would take place early, for he felt it would put a few $1,000s in his pocket. This letter seems to indicate that one of the principal reasons Leidesdorff was interested in a change in government was the help it would be to his business. The California merchant was also interested in establishing rapid transportation as an aid to his business. He desired to secure mail and dispatches from Sutter's Fort at Sacramento in a shorter time than was at that time possible. He dreamed of establishing 24-hour express service on the Sacramento River from New Helveta, as Sutter's Fort was then called, to San Francisco. This was to be done by means of a steamboat which he had purchased from Sitka, Russia. All right, this was his plan. This boat was built by an American company, especially for the pleasure of the Russian governmental officials. The maiden trip was made with a group of friends up the Sacramento River to New Helveta. Instead of the 24 hours the captain had hoped it would take, it took 6 days, a disappointment to all concerned. The reason for this failure was that the ship was slow and very small, being only 34 feet long and 9 feet wide, with depth below deck of 3½ feet. The dimensions seem to have made the vessel top heavy, for soon after its first trip it sank in the San Francisco Bay and put an end to the rapid transportation on the Sacramento for a long time. You guys see what happened? In spite of his failure, Captain Leidesdorff was the first person to operate a steamboat on the San Francisco Bay and the Sacramento River, all right? First person, not just black, but first person. And this was a so-called black man. Leidesdorff died at the age of 38 on May 18th, 1848. With some men, death is the end, but if property is involved, that is not the case, all right? So there's a big part of his story, history, that deals with his property and who it went to after he passed away. He passed away all of a sudden, very young, and supposedly he had no heirs, and there was a lot of disputes. We're gonna read about it probably right now in this article. All right, let's see what it's got to say. But it says the disease from which Leidesdorff died was typhus. He did not think his illness was serious and expected to return to health and his business. Therefore, he had not made a will. This caused much confusion to individuals and to the state because of the large amount of money involved. Larkin, as consul of the United States, assumed that it was his responsibility to act as administrator of the property left by Captain Leidesdorff. When he began to examine the records, he found that he could not do this, for Leidesdorff was a Mexican citizen. Whether Larkin had forgotten this or whether he had been misled by Leidesdorff's enthusiasm for the American cause is not clear. He should have known this, for it had come up in Leidesdorff's appointment as sub-consul of the United States. So that's the irony, right? Got this guy helping California literally be secured to the United States, the West, but he was still a Mexican citizen. That's how you had to live in that part of the world. The job of administrator passed to W.D. Howard. He took it over at once and moved to Leidesdorff's residence, the best home at that time in the city of San Francisco. The value of the property was such that Howard had to secure 2 bondsmen who had to give security of $50,000 each. Now, when we're talking about, a property in San Francisco, one of the best homes at that time, there's a lot of competition. If you guys see the old pictures of San Francisco, these beautiful, like, mansions, right? The building, old world style building, before the fires and earthquakes. You guys know what I'm talking about, before the resets. So this is one of the best homes at that time in San Francisco. We're talking about this so-called black man's, right? It says Howard, so this guy Howard took over the estate. Howard then took over the property, which had an indebtedness of $60,000 on it. This was a small amount, for the value of the land began to increase as gold had been discovered on the property. This increase in the value of his property caused Captain J.L. Folsom, assistant quartermaster of the United States Army in San Francisco, to become interested in it. When he found that Leidesdorff had died and left property which had increased in value, he made arrangements to secure it. William H. Davis, who was one of the bondsmen for Howard and who was who was somewhat hostile to Folsom, accused him of slipping away to the St. Croix Island and purchasing all the Leidesdorff property for $50,000. This was not difficult, for Maria Ann Sparks, his mother, had no way of knowing the value of the property. She probably had not heard from her son for some time. There was no evidence available to indicate that he ever said much about any member of his family. When Maria Ann Sparks found out the vague or value of the property, she demanded more from Captain Folsom. He then paid her another $25,000, which enabled him to secure a deed for the property valued at $1,500,000. The property involved caused much confusion since Leidesdorff had died without making a will. Many other persons became interested. Even the state of California made an effort to secure it, but this failed because the courts would not sustain the state in its contention. All right. Time will not permit a discussion of this matter, but it is sufficient to say that Folsom was able to defend his property from all those who tried to get it. He was not able to enjoy it very long, for he died at the age of 38. The settlement of the Folsom estate started soon after his death. William Alexander Leidesdorff was without doubt one of the great men of early San Francisco and the state of California. He played a major role in establishing the United States on the Pacific coast. All right, he played a major role helping the United States establish themselves over there. Come on now, and should be better known. He should be better known, but he isn't. He is mentioned by everyone who writes extensively on the history of California and the city of San Francisco. The city has a street named in his honor. It is a very small street and may be overlooked by many who visit San Francisco. William Alexander Leidesdorff is one of California's illustrious citizens, all right? And that was by W.S. Savage, Lincoln University, Missouri, all right? Here in the SeattleMedium.com, we have them recognizing William Alexander Leidesdorff, the trailblazing pioneer of so-called African American business and diplomacy. Right, here's his image again. Says that he was a Danish American businessman, diplomat, and politician who was considered by some to be America's first black millionaire. First black millionaire born in the Danish West Indies in 1810. He came to California in 1841, where he established himself as a successful merchant and became one of the most prominent figures in the early days of the state. Okay. African American registry, William Leidesdorff, explorer and businessman. On this day, we celebrate the birth of William Alexander Leidesdorff in 1810. He was a black businessman and explorer. A black businessman and explorer. Leidesdorff was born in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, to a white Danish father and African mother. That's the hijack. He was a merchant captain, first in New York, then New Orleans, and by 1841 in California. All right, so here's this image again, you guys can see. San Francisco Examiner, the incredible story of William Leidesdorff, San Francisco's black founding father. San Francisco's black founding father. Sephardic Jew and Indian, huh? San Francisco's history is quite literally inscribed on its streets. Just look at the signs. Nearly every street in and around the downtown is named after a major figure in the city's founding. Nearly all were so-called white men. Supposedly, that's what they try to make you think. They've been whitewashed too. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna keep doing more videos. Most, if not all, did awful things in addition to building modern San Francisco. But one pioneer, honored only by a tiny financial district alley, stands out not only for his backgrounds and his remarkable life story, but for his unsung impact on the city. William Alexander Leidesdorff was a ship captain and a merchant, and an entrepreneur and a public servant, a patriotic American and a Mexican citizen, a black man and a Jew. A black man and a Jew. That's the hijacks. He is also widely believed to be the first millionaire of African American descent. So all the tags they're putting on him, well, he's most likely just Sephardic, Jewish, and American Indian. In 1840s, Leidesdorff helped shepherd San Francisco into existence, creating enduring institutions like the public school system and treasury. His untimely death in 1848 meant he never saw his adopted home grow into a great metropolis or the unimaginable riches produced by his vast landholdings in the city and in the foothill gold fields. You guys hear that? Did they really get rid of him? Today, the only trace of Leidesdorff's legacy on the cityscape is a two-block alley between Montgomery and Sansom Streets. Leidesdorff's alley is also the cross street of the Examiner's new home at the Merchants Exchange Building. While the paper is not quite as old as Leidesdorff, the Examiner was founded in 1865. We thought it would be fitting to dedicate our first historical faces profile to our next door neighbor. A statue in plague of the man at the corner of Leidesdorff and Pine was funded in part by the Examiner owner and publisher Clint Riley. All right. So that's, I guess they put a statue of him there, right? This is his obituary. He died at his own residence in this place at 1:00 a.m. on the 18th. And still after an illness of 7 days of a fever, William A. Leidesdorff, Esquire, late U.S. Vice Consul for the Sport, having received the consolidations of Catholic religion during his illness, he was buried yesterday at 3:00 after the appropriate ceremonies in the Mission Church of Dolores near San Francisco, one of the largest and most respectable assemblages ever witnessed. As a merchant and citizen, he was generous, enterprising, and public-spirited, and his name intimately identified with the growth and prosperity of San Francisco. It is no injustice to the living or unmeaning praise for the dead to say that the town has lost its most valuable resident, and the feeling evinced by the community is an involuntary tribute to his merits as a man and a citizen. You see, he was well respected, well loved, literally the founder. His energy of character and business enterprises have so blended his history with that of San Francisco that all classes deplore his death as a great public calamity. And in this Jewish Encyclopedia website, they talk about him, right? They don't even mention that he's so-called black. They don't mention nothing about him being so-called black or Negro, and that's the thing. They don't want you to really know this, but he's so-called Jewish too, huh? And an Indian, huh? And an Indian. So here, in this, he's listed. If you guys have any articles on him, if you're interested in knowing more, it says racism, slavery, and free enterprise, black entrepreneurship in the United States before the Civil War. He's talked about here a lot, talking about being the first black millionaire and all that. This is a good article on him. Here in this book, The History of California by Theodore Henry Hittel from 1885 mentions him, as one of the important people here in San Francisco. Another book here is the same one, but a different volume. And we're just talking about Leidesdorff and his estate, which was supposed to be worth $1.5 million, had escheated, and he recommended proceedings for its recovery. So this is what we just read about. That's a lot of the history is talked about. In this book, The Early Days and Men of California by William F. Swazi from 1891. William Leidesdorff is here mentioned as well. Says Mr. Gildia died at the fort early in January 1846. About the same time, I left the fort in company with Captain W.A. Leidesdorff, American Vice Consul at Yerba Buena, San Francisco. See, so like quick mentions like that. All right. Here it says that William A. Leidesdorff was a Danish extraction and was a native of the island of Jamaica. He was in the business of general merchandising in Yerba Buena, San Francisco, as early as 1839 and continued to be one of the most enterprising and extensive businessmen of the place up to the time of his death. At the time of the raising of the United States flag in July 1846, he was United States Vice Consul. From 1845 to 1848, he was the principal merchant. He accumulated and left a large estate. The property has since become of immense value and reaches far into the millions. His estate was claimed by the state on the ground that he died intestate, leaving alien heirs, though legitimate relatives, and that his property became escheated to the state. Captain J.L. Folsom subsequently visited the island of Jamaica with the view of purchasing the title of the heirs, several of whom he succeeded in finding and acquiring their title, but it was always thought there were other heirs living who have never conveyed away their rights as heirs to the state. You see that? Captain Leidesdorff was in the strongest sense a man of public spirit and was prominently identified with every enterprise tending to advance the interests of the community. He was almost a constant member of the different ayuntamientos and town councils during his time. He procured from the Russian government a Sitka, a little steamboat, right? That was his little steamboat venture that didn't do so good. Eventually, it sunk right in the San Francisco Bay. It says here, personally, he was a man of fine appearance and pleasant address, of a swarthy complexion. So swarthy. You guys see that? So swarthy. Can I get a hashtag so swarthy? You guys see? So when they're doing that whitewashing, they got here like on Wikipedia, right? You see, does this guy look swarthy to you? Dodge the hijack big time. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Because he was of a swarthy complexion, denoting a tropical descent of great energy and enterprise, of an impetuous and rather irascible temperament, but not at all implacable. He was in the very prime of his life when he died on May 18th, 1848, being but 36 years of age, and was buried in the churchyard of the Mission of Dolores. His death was considered a public loss and was most sincerely and generally deplored. All places of business were closed, flags were at half mast on the building, and shaped and minute guns fired during his funeral ceremonies. All right, and that's all on him. I just wanted to show you guys that he is talked about in all of California history. This is a journal of the state sessions of the Senate of the state of California. We're also talking about, Leidesdorff's estate, uh, the legal, most about the legal parts of who's gonna, take his estate. All right. And then we got this book, The Annals of San Francisco, containing a summary of the history of the first discovery, settlement, progress, and present conditions of California, and a complete history of all the important events connected with its great city, to which are added biographical memoirs of some prominent citizens. So even this, again, they got William A. Leidesdorff died of the brain fever. This gentleman was the United States Vice Consul at San Francisco and was closely connected with all the interests of the place. His decease was much regretted by the townspeople, a large number of whom attended in his funeral procession. All places of business and entertainment were closed on the occasion. The flags at the barracks and of the vessels in port hung at half mast during the day, while minute guns were fired at the burial train moved on towards the Mission Dolores and the churchyard which place the body was interred. Mr. Leidesdorff was a Danish extraction and the Roman Catholic religion. He had been nearly 9 years in business in San Francisco and was about 36 years old. The property he left was of considerable value at the time of his death, though heavily burdened with debts, while as much as it consisted of real estate on which the growing city afterwards spread its value at this date is immense. The deceased left no legal heirs on the spot, and his estate was administered by Mr. William D. M. Howard under authority of the alcalde for behoof of all concerned. Much litigation among parties claiming to be administrators or heirs or assignees of heirs of the deceased afterwards resulted, which it is believed not yet fairly ended. The law proceedings and history of the estate generally form quite an event in the annals of the town, and deserve a more particular notice, which will be given in a subsequent chapter. All right, so it was so controversial what was going on, right? He left no heirs. He all of a sudden died, this millionaire. And his estate all of a sudden was worth millions because of the gold. I just wanted to be able to bring this to you guys because we're going to be talking about a lot of the founders and pioneers of the West. And I'm going to show you guys these were melanated folks. These were so-called black folks, just like William Alexander Leidesdorff here was. All right. One of the main founders of San Francisco, a black man, possibly Caribbean too, through his mom and Sephardic Jewish ancestry, most likely. All right. You guys know the history, so you guys can put it all together when we're talking about context, what I was saying in the beginning of the video. A lot of people teach us, but then they try to Africanize him without being able to prove any African, and you're leaving out a whole history. And then you're literally almost leaving him out of history because he was a black man. I'm going to show you guys the whole West, so-called black, the Black West, so-called black, all right? Future videos coming. I got a lot coming on that, all right? And I'm going to show you also the role that Sephardic Jews played in that, and American Indians as well. But I hope you enjoyed today's reading. We learned a little bit about this person that doesn't get this information, this person that is not taught to us in schools, not that much, all right? But he's a founder, literally one of the main founders of San Francisco, California, as you guys saw. And you saw how deep his heritage may go. And no African in him, you got to prove that part, all right? William Alexander Leidesdorff. Thanks for hearing me reading. Once again, taking the time to be here. Appreciate you guys sitting through all the way to the end of the video. All right. I got none but love for you guys. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.